Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming down and joining us for our very amazing panel discussion and tuning in right here at the space at Instinct in Singapore. We wish you a really sunny, not really, rainy day and hope everyone's fine. So my name is Christine. I'm with Instinct, and I just very quickly like to introduce you to everyone that's here on our panel. So for our two lovely judges that have joined us, we have Icki all the way from London. Hi, Icki. And Aleksandra all the way from Serbia right now. And yeah, they'll be giving us a little bit more insight as to their various topics. And then we also have with us Hilda from MUSTHAVEKEYS, the curator of the whole entire festival, as well as our exhibition. And Serial Co, who are our lovely designers and worked really hard on the metaverse with us. And also, last but not least, we have Wyn-Lyn and Wang Lin, who are our two top 3 artists that have joined us today. So I'll be handing my time over to Ivan, who will be the moderator, also from MUSTHAVEKEYS, to kick us off with our panel discussion. So without further ado, Ivan, take it away. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Christy. I hope I still have something to say. Okay, I'll just introduce myself a little bit first. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the panel discussion of Instinc the Art Festival. I'm Iven Cheung from MUSTHAVEKEYS, like a new curatorial studio from Hong Kong, founded with my partner Hilda Chan, who's also on this panel. We're very honored to be invited by Instinc to join this exciting new digital art festival. We are thrilled to collaborate with all the judges and artists, and also Serial Co, who is responsible for designing and building the amazing virtual gallery space on the metaverse. So just a little background information of the festival. In July, the Instinc the Art Festival openly called for digital artworks in response to the film Ignite the Future, which imagines an age when the metaverse becomes inseparable from our lives. The reaction was very, very overwhelming. The shortlisted artworks are from 14 countries and regions. They are now on display in the virtual metaverse exhibition and also a physical showcase at Instinc Space in Singapore right now. Today, we're honored to have 6 speakers. Should we follow the order we originally proposed? I mean, if we follow that order, we should start with Hilda, who is going to present our curatorial effort as a curator for the festival. Yeah, so please go ahead.
Okay, hi everyone. This is Hilda Chan from MUSTHAVEKEYS, and I'm really happy to co-create this festival together with Ivan and be here at Singapore. So today I would like to share about the curatorial concept, the cave as a metaphor in a digital art world. Yep. So the cave is a journey and a metaphor to discover and imagine an age where the metaverse become inseparable from our lives. The idea is to collectively, we contemplate the boundaries between the reality and the virtual reality. And we would like to invite visitors to set aside the current uncertainties and look into the future where the immense possibilities made possible by technology. So there are 4 different aspects to the curatorial concept. First is the Plato's allegory of the cave. Second is exploring the unknown, and third about post-pandemic, and fourth back to the cave, which is I would like to call it a cave within a cave. So for the spatial design and the curatorial concept, we took inspiration from the allegory of the Plato's cave. Plato used the cave as a symbolic representation of how human beings live in the world. In contrast, reality versus our interpretation of it. So the exploration and exposure to uncharted realities has been part of human condition. It is the transitional stage, the unknown, that is both exciting and alienating. So to explore the unknown is the cave is a metaphor for our current perception of the metaverse. So you can see like on the right is Plato right there. We are really happy for Serial to put Plato's portrait there as a reference and tribute to Plato. And our understanding of virtual reality is constrained by our technology limitation and accessibility to technologies. And we feel that we are still at the beginning of an era where the physical and digital realities becomes interweave and integrating into one. So also we would like to, for the cave to reference our the situation of post-pandemic. During the recent global pandemic, many have taken refuge into our own caves. We all long for human connections more than ever, and we are able to be connected by technologies during shutdowns and isolations. So for the concept back to the cave and a cave within caves, the exhibition space is divided into 4 different sections. So we have the first 2 sections called Unknowable Dreams and Potential Realities, showing the shortlisted artworks from the open call. And for Eternal Presence, showing works, the winning artworks by the top 3 artists. And finally, we have Meta Moments. So Meta Moments, we are showing the collaboration exhibition during the residency by the top 3 artists. So here we can see the spatial arrangement of the cave, of our exhibition space. It is divided into the 4 sections I've mentioned just now. So it is a journey. We go through the cave from dark to light. So we start at the bottom, which you see it says lobby, and then eventually we will go through the cave into the window to the world, which we'll able to see the natural light the first time. So within the cave, there's only like a fire which is in the middle of the space, which is man-made, and you can only see the shadow and the light from the fire, which also reference to the allegory of the Plato's cave. So the first gallery space is called Unknowable Dreams. So this section, we have put artworks that explore hidden desires and dreams unfilled by the technologies. So this is our first half of the shortlisted artworks. And the second section is called Potential Reality. So the works are to imagine the infinite possibilities of our digital future. And then we move to the middle of the cave, which is the internal presence. We have artworks by the top 3 artists, the winning artworks by Chang Wang Qin, Wyn-Lyn Tang, and Shou, Ho Jun Shou. Wyn-Lyn and Wang Qin is from Singapore and Shou is from South Korea. So this gallery symbolize a digital existence that lasts forever and to be preserved and revisited by future generations. And finally, it is the last section of our journey. It's called Meta Moments. So the artists collectively contemplate the boundaries between virtual reality and the reality. And we would like to invite visitors to take a meta moment to set aside current uncertainties and look into a future with immense possibilities made possible by technology. So the collaboration is a collaborative exhibition within the virtual space. It is a unique world and enclosed cave on its own. And it is also based on personal experience of the virtual presence. And I would also like to point out that meta moments is a concept inspired by the research psychologist called Mark Brackett. Meta moments refers to a pause, a small window of time that help us to step back to see a situation in a new light. We would like visitors to end the exhibition in space and look out to the potentials of the metaverse in the future. And the visitors can also take a pause here and to meditate their earlier journeys through the cave. So this is the brief introduction of the concept. So thank you.
Oh, great. Thank you, Hilda. This is the format I propose. I may ask 1 or 2 follow-up questions after each presentation, but I would also like to invite all the speakers and participants or the public to ask questions, to ask the speaker the questions if you're interested, so we can have some interaction in between. So in this case, I think I may not have additional questions for Hilda because she and I work together on this whole thing. Does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, hi, Icki. I'm curious, how did the collaborative part, the finale of this journey through Plato's cave, end up in the end? You know, because what we're looking at is an incredibly diverse kind of artistic interpretation, and I had some curiosity around how that worked in reality and what output looked like.
Hi, Icki. So the collaboration is a collaborative exhibition. So I think the artists, some artists like Wang Lin, he did a collaborative work with other top 20 artists. So one of the work, he provided instruction for the other participants to follow, and then he collected the data as part of the work. So this is one aspect of the collaboration, and another aspect would be a collaboration between the curator with the curatorial concept and also Serial provided with their technical feedback and advice how to realize some of these works, and also the spatial arrangement as well in this part of the exhibition. It's largely because of Serial's input. So we know how to put together all the works and the format as well. And you see there's one work that looks like a chandelier in the middle is also a 3D model, a work by Wang Lin that was imported into the space. And then Serial gave their feedback how to utilize it with the light kind of baking into the sculpture, the virtual sculpture as well. So yeah, so I think we have achieved a lot during the 1 month residency to work together and how to put everything together. So to answer your question, so this is how the collaboration went.
So it's a mixture of kind of virtual and conceptual collaboration digitally. Do you think that this may be something that over there at Instinct in Singapore you're interested in doing in the future and carrying forward? Because of course, when you operate or collaborate in that way, you have so much opportunity to pull in people, like you say. How many submissions? 14 countries, did we say? In the end, you know, which is remarkable, right? You know, so credit to you all for the wonderful job that you've done. But you know, is this just a one-off exercise, or is this going to be something, you know, that you continue to explore as you move forward?
Yeah, maybe I can answer that. Because we always have this vision of collaborations in the past, when even before we step into this digital world. So we are quite, you know, excited to, you know, see the results of this collaborative thing in the virtual world, in the metaverse. And we are definitely very happy, and you know, we really want to look forward to more collaborations with more artists, and you know, in this way, because I think the possibilities are limitless, you know, with this and also because of the pandemic, we are so used to, you know, all these online meetings. So I feel that definitely there is a big opportunity for us to, you know, to continue this, you know, and we didn't think that it could happen, and it's like quite seamlessly. So definitely it's a great start, and as Instinct, we hope that we can see this, you know, blossom and flourish in the future.
Great. Maybe I would invite Jake from Serial to share a little bit more about the metaverse design and build a bit later, maybe after your presentation. So shall we move on to our second presentation? Could I invite Wang Lin to share one of the top three artists of the Open Core? Could you share with us a little bit about your experience working for the collaborative exhibition and your overall experience of the Instinc Art Festival?
Hi, I'm Wyn-Lyn. I maybe would like to just give a little bit of background to myself. So I'm a fine arts painter, and I've been working as an artist for over 15 years in the traditional fine art world. So to be honest, I was really honored and surprised to be selected as one of the top 3 artists, as digital art is a very recent foray for me. But really during the whole residency, it was such a positive and productive time because I got to meet other artists who have been working in the digital format for, well, probably a longer time than I myself have. And it was just this discussions of techniques or new ideas that I could explore in the future that got me really excited as well. So yeah, I was really very appreciative for this time and the residency. Starting off, I just wanted to also maybe talk a bit about what led me to want to enter this digital platform as an artist. So in recent years, I've been questioning what painting is and can be, and all the while exploring various ways to interpret space, light, and the experiential in painting. For instance, here's an installation shot of a recent solo exhibition presented at Force Gallery in Singapore of sculptural paintings on plexiglass, where viewers could walk 360 degrees around the sculptural work. So in a sense, I started thinking about how one could experience, like I mentioned, space, light, while still thinking about formalities in painting. So in that way, as I started exploring the digital medium as a way to extend my painting practice, I wanted to work with the digital medium format in a way that I wouldn't be able to do in a physical work. For instance, maybe I can skip to the next slide. Hence, this led me to think about a non-static work. So rather than maybe recreating a painting into a digital format, I wanted to create these almost morphing paintings where it's moving, something that, you know, might not, well, it's a painting in real life, a physical painting in real life is static in that sense. So I started exploring the digital medium as I might work on a new medium, such as plexiglass, wood, or metal. I wanted to harness the inherent properties of the digital space. So this is just an example of some of my of the works, earlier works actually. Yeah. So I think we can kind of just quickly skim through this. It was just an example of how I wanted to think about morphing paintings. During the residency, I collected and curated over 1,000 images of my own physical paintings, and using AI machine learning tools, I generated these images to create a new output based on the machine learning my painting style. In doing so, I was interested in exploring that relationship between man and machine, art and technology. And in this collaboration with the machine learning tool, I'm also curious to see what the machine might interpret and represent of my painting style. So these are some of the examples of my physical paintings, and these are some examples of the images that I fed the machine learning tool as well. So yeah, I have worked on various materials in the physical sense, from canvas to metal to plexiglass to wood, such as these shaped wood paintings. As I was feeding the images to the machine learning software, I really wanted to still leave some room for ambiguity, such that the output would not result in an exact replica of my painting. So in that sense, I also included other images just to throw off this algorithm, such as these seaweed installations that I've created. I was all the while thinking about the essence of light. So images that I was also curating included my own experience of light or my own interpretation of light. And this was also responding to the curatorial theme. I was interested in linking my observations of the natural world with technology and new media processes. So the idea of the metaverse as a cave got me interested in thinking of how one might see the light as one exits the cave. And this image that we're seeing here is just an example of some of the data sets that I have included. Maybe we'll see what's the next image. So in this next few images, they are the 5 works that were created for the exhibition at Instinc. And as I mentioned, I was thinking of how one might see the light as one exits the cave in the metaverse. So during the residency, the 5 new generative videos titled First Light was created. And it's inspired by the essence of rhythms of light in nature. And the circular symbols that were included was also a suggestion of infinity, just like how the generative videos are generated and looped, and the algorithm as well of the machine learning tool suggests the idea of an infinite amount of morphing paintings that might result from the generation. So all the while harnessing the use of technology, I still wish to preserve a painterly analog emotive feel to my digital work. And also, just like my physical abstract paintings, my generative digital art comes from a deeply intuitive, emotional place. And that really affects the way that I might choose or curate the images that are fed to the machine learning tool. There's also a rhythm to my generative videos that I edited, which I liken to my painting process. The slow morphing, shape-shifting landscape orbits between the painted and the digital, the real and the surreal. So in thinking about the next steps for future works that I wish to explore on this digital platform, I'm still also thinking of how I can extend the visual language of my painting practice. And I think that's it from me. Welcome any questions that might come from anyone.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Wyn-Lyn. Oh, Icki has a question already.
I really struggle with any form of group discussion because I can't stop thinking as people present, especially when they present so wonderfully and such interesting and beautiful description in such a short time of what you did and what you do. So first of all, what a pleasure to see the work. Thrilled by that. I'm curious about your experience. So you chose as a fine artist exploring digital mediums to take the AI route, right?
Yeah.
GAN,
Yeah.
training algorithms with images of your choice and using that to kind of realize your vision, right?
Yeah.
Which I think is wonderful.
Thank
Now,
you.
with the advent of AI, and we all know now AI is becoming even more, it's kind of brought up the level of entry, the barriers of entry into art, you know, with word prompted AI. GAN is obviously still its own thing, and so on and so forth. And one of the questions that I often hear within the AI communities is that often those types of AI, whether it be Midjourney, DALL-E, or so on and so forth, are trained on the same images. And over time, what's going to happen is that current AI production is also going to become part of that library of assets. And so it's almost like you're going to begin to have AI generating AI using AI, right? And so where does our control end? So I was curious about your process and your value and your choice, your very intentional choice to use your own images and actually leverage it as a tool. And how do you feel about that in general? And what did you learn from that?
Okay. I mean, to backtrack a little bit to why and how I started to think about using GAN training, was really the motivation for that was really about extending my painting practice. So for me, it was important to use my own painting images because I was curious to see what what AI or this GAN training would interpret or represent of my painting style. So initially, my first few generative works were really shit because I was, I think, putting in too many. I mean, I had to find a balance of the kind of images that I was feeding it. If I fed it, I didn't want it to look like an exact replica of my current painting style. I still wanted the machine to be a collaborator rather than just simply a machine to feed or to spit out what I'm feeding it. So in that sense, as thinking of it as a collaborator, as I mentioned, I wanted to still leave some room for ambiguity for a machine to kind of self-interpret. Yeah. So I think in that way, I when I was selecting images, for example, because I was thinking a lot about the essence of light. So as I was cropping images from my paintings, I was also in some ways maybe intuitively cropping sections that had more of that essence of light for me as a painter, maybe more breathing space, more negative spaces, and then a few Trojan horses of images thrown in as the photographs that you've seen that I've taken of light in real life. So in that way, I started to also learn in the process of what kind of imagery could create the emotive effect that I wanted. Because in the early works, as I mentioned, they were pretty shitty because it was either too much positive spaces that I was feeding, or and it wasn't giving that same idea of because I'm very inspired by Chinese painting aesthetics as well. So I wanted to also still have that feeling even in the digital work. So I think when things started to become a little bit too heavy or dull in that sense, I started to learn how I could include or lighten the negative space. So I think that was important for me as a learning process. Yeah.
I think Aleksandra has a question, right? Please.
Yes, I have a question, and my space key is giving me troubles whenever. Sometimes it gets, sometimes it doesn't. So thank you for a lovely presentation, Wyn-Lyn. I wanted to ask you, what were your first impressions when you got the results from the style gun? Because basically you're making a generative system, you're feeding your own paintings, and in some way you're expecting the result, or you're curating the result by feeding different kinds of images. So where is that excitement we get from a generative piece, and what was that moment when you got surprised and you felt this is something different, not something that I've made, that's something that's a collaboration, and when you decided that that's something valuable to be called a collaboration?
Yeah. I think in the sense that although I am curating, and in some levels I'm expecting a certain kind of result, but there is also the element of surprise in each time I'm generating or regenerating a new set of images. I get maybe surprising compositions or or compositions that I may not have thought about in a physical painting. And that was the level of surprise for me that I liked, because I think even though I was maybe consciously curating the feeling, the feeling or the emotive aspect of things. When I talk about the emotive aspect, I mean how I would like it to feel a sense of lightness or weightlessness or negative space being part of that emotive aspect. Those were the elements that I was hoping to curate and initiate with the machine. But the surprise came from the kind of compositions that the machine generated for me. So as in abstract paintings, when I'm also curating my own as I'm painting a physical painting and a physical abstract painting, I don't know what the final result will be, because I don't pre-plan the compositions of my abstract paintings. I take the process making as a very organic, spontaneous process as well. So I could start with a very spontaneous stroke on a canvas, and then it's almost like a conversation between myself and the canvas as I carry on working on it. So in the same way as with the machine, as I regenerate and generate, each time I hit the button to regenerate a new set, it's also that same conversation I'm having with the machine. And I'm pleasantly surprised sometimes when the composition comes out in a unexpected presentation that I may not have maybe painted on a physical painting. And that has also led me to now, I'm creating a new series of physical paintings based on all these latent spaces that I've generated with GAN training. So when I have completed this new series of physical paintings, I actually intend to photograph those and feed it back into the machine and regenerate a new training and see what happens. So there's going to be this infinite cycle of artist, machine, each person, well, we call the machine a person, each person kind of painting, and then you're kind of feeding each other the new set. So that's my future works, well, that I plan to actually create.
Okay, great. Actually, I have a follow-up question, but maybe I'll save it until after Wang Lin's presentation. Okay, so could we have Wang Lin, also one of the top 3 artists? Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Thanks for kind of holding and bringing everything together. So this is a presentation of essentially my process and the background as well, what I've been doing over the past, few years, or essentially, well, most of my life. So basically, I was art trained, and then I went to university, and then I did engineering for like 6 years, and then did research in engineering, all with the intention of, forwarding my art training, or at least trying to meld engineering and artistic practice together. So basically, usually I'm a installation artist. I love creating experiences for people, creating chances for people to interact with space, the environment around them, or let them kind of develop a greater sensitivity to space. And usually technology has been kind of that means to allow me to curate a space, or it allows me to kind of emphasize how the practices of the STEM fields are very much similar to actually artistic practice or artistic processes. So I actually stayed on to continue with my master's in engineering, because I realized that there were a lot of similarities in research. And I love to joke around and say, well, the bachelor's degree in engineering was very much a paper degree in professional Googling. So I felt the need to like go further in that manner. And what you see on the slides now is actually 2 of the installations that I did for Purdue University in the US for their orientation program that happened in August. It was a whole chaotic mess from receiving kind of the grant news later than it was supposed to go out to coordinating people doing the installation from like halfway around the world because I had to come back home. But a warm light, the installation of warm light was essentially a giant monolith light that tried to represent or at least symbolize a bonfire, that the more people like screamed into it, the more people interacted with it, essentially the louder the volume and the bigger the crowd, the brighter it will glow. Very similar to the kind of community you get when coming together at a bonfire or in like camp or in camps and things like that. And it's quite interesting because it was also proposed essentially during whilst most countries were coming out of the COVID pandemic, or at least the lockdown period. So it kind of brought warmth to hopefully more than 8,000 incoming students. The other one next to it, which is Bistable Embrace, is an interesting piece because most people would not associate art, or at least most people won't associate engineering with the non-electrical, computer science parts of things. So this is actually a purely material-based research project that was being engaged with the lab I was in, where you have mechanical logic using something as simple as dome sheets. So people are really familiar with like the Pop-It kind of fidget toys that you pop the domes back and forth. But something as simple as removing like the boundaries or the walls around the sheet or in between, rows of domes actually allows the sheet to change shape. So it's almost a case of a reciprocal relationship where, the more you interact with this sheet, the more it will interact back with you. And actually, the larger it is, or if you stand inside or like right in front of the sheet and start pressing it, or your friend starts pressing it, it will start wrapping around you. And so like, it was also this kind of contention with trying to get people to play with the sheet more so that they will see the full effect. A lot of people were very hesitant, at least that was what the feedback I got was, like people were hesitant to press, they press one and they're done, they walk off. So it's kind of that interesting interaction that I wanted to get at, and it's a continued project. So now kind of leading into that, coming back to Singapore, there's always kind of that lack of physical space, so installations aren't easy to come by. So what I did was more almost like performative documenting my walk, which essentially is a walk through familiar and unfamiliar spaces around me. So some of them would be from my university as like almost like a memento of kind of leaving on my second home for the past 6 years. But in some cases, when I came back to Singapore in this residency, it was more a case of trying to re-explore familiar places that I have visited before. So the interesting thing is that I really don't control necessarily where I walk. It's curated to in some aspect, but at the same time, there's always new things to see. Like for instance, I brought this up during one of the artist talks, which was like, there's this light in my neighborhood that I didn't know exists. And unusually it lights up when you are not there. So when people don't walk under the light turns on. And then when people walk under the light, it turns off. So it's kind of weird, it's counterintuitive, but you tend to pick up all these like nuances in the environment around you. And I think this whole idea just started when COVID happened, and I just took this, I was taking this walk in the railway corridor, the green corridor in Singapore, and I wanted to use these intangible elements, how to capture like negative space where we kind of walk through, to light as well. So I was using data that I personally kind of collected and in some ways curated. So I collected light data, I collected the GPS data, and then they manifested themselves in all these shapes. and forms. So usually it's very recognizable, like you see the colorful one and the black and white one on the top left and right corner. Those are very like clearly loops, but still abstracted in the sense that you don't know where they are, whether they are, just generated from random data or random, points, or whether they're actually curated in any way. So usually I love to play around with titles as well. So I make sure like the title hints at something or gives a suggestion or something, so that it's not completely detached from what I wanted to explore. And then from there I further explore into different could you go back, please? So I explore to like different methods of presenting it in some ways. So a lot of the time they were like two-dimensional. And you can see, for instance, like almost starburst in the middle to like the various Bezier curves and the lines connecting the path. They almost brought around like a three-dimensional element to it. So I started exploring this using various tools. Initially, it was just vanilla JavaScript. So it's kind of, everything you code, every number you change will affect it in some way. You can break your own program, that kind of thing. Thereafter, I thought, okay, maybe I should try things like 3JS, which is a plugin, which is the library for like three-dimensional and WebGL stuff. And then I went on to use Blender, kind of program everything into Blender in terms using Python, and then try to generate like three-dimensional structures out of this. So moving on from this residency, it was more or less like a deep end dive kind of thing. Like I came back only in May, and then the next thing I know, like I get this chance to work with two other artists, or like at least explore like the concepts with two other artists. So a lot of late nights, a lot of sleeping at like 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. trying to figure out what I can do, what I should do. And essentially that's the first one is a very obvious like path, that walk that I took around the neighborhood that I grew up in. And I think it didn't need really a description to explain like what I did, because I hope the visuals spoke for themselves. And I documented, where I walked, how I walked, the time I took, which order I went. And interestingly, I took this idea of loops and then I also manifested it in the next work, which is almost reminiscent of like a satellite. But how I got there was through this entire process, like, finally using math that I thought I would never use in art, and kind of toying with different ideas on how to present the data. So in some ways, it's very abstracted, very glorified data visualization. But I think it gives the opportunity for creativity and trying to find out ways to present, numbers and things that are otherwise in themselves so abstract. So I played around and I just wanted to find ways of presenting it. You can see like even some pop culture references at the bottom of the middle image. Just, things that hint at, even ideas that are very similar in other forms and other mediums. So pop culture comes through, anime comes through, different graphic representations comes through, data visualization in data science comes through, stuff like that. So this is the one that looks very much like a chandelier / satellite, and give me a space, even if it's a digital space, and I'll try to make use of it. So those who manage to visit the digital exhibition, it is like the three-dimensional kind of rotating object in space. And just, kind of exploring even the digital space that I create. So it's a volume, right? Like, so it's a volume of rotating kind of cylinders. So different angles will create, different perceptions for people. And that's kind of where I wanted to explore the digital space as well. I used to take, I used to be very like jealous of people who, do very realistic 3D graphics for like, animation or movies and stuff like that. But I realized that's, very against my concept, like my conceptual development and my processes. So I didn't force it. I rather just, I just let my like I just let my processes shape the eventuality of stuff. So rather than, you know, oh, I must create something realistic for an animation or something. So yeah. So this one is also kind of a play of the animation. So it's just amazing to me how one data set could manifest itself as in these three really interesting ways. And then again, these are only just three of like the countless ways it can possibly show itself. So this is another one. And honestly speaking, this is one of the ones that I'm kind of most proud of, simply because I literally thought of this idea after being inspired by some, you know, data visualizations. And I was like, okay, I want to create this, but I only have like, well, I have -1 day to submit it. So I needed to figure out a way to get it to work. And that was pretty much it. And the last one I think was touched on is just a collaboration. I just want to play with the idea of collaboration, but abstracted again, once again. So the instructions was kind of harken back to like artists like Sol LeWitt, where he gives instructions for drawings to his audiences or like to individuals. And I pretty much did the same. And so 8 individuals did 8 different walks. And if you actually look closely, the lightning essentially randomizes the connecting points, data points between each walk. So each walk is connected essentially and randomly to each other walk below. So I could have done it more with like very straight lines. I could have done it in different ways, but I thought it would be too immediate, too obvious, too direct if I did it. And secondly, like usually you want to curate something visually appealing or something visually intriguing to people. So I thought this idea of like the lightning or the idea of the web might be interesting to play with. And that's how this kind of piece came out. And actually, the last work, the 5th work that was presented in the show is actually the background to my first slide and what's going to be the last slide as well. So it was kind of a homage to my last few days in Purdue University and just manifesting it in different colors, because honestly speaking, my university's colors are gold and black, and they don't turn out well digitally, because how can you manifest gold if you don't have lighting and shading and stuff like that? But yeah, so it was very much a play on data the whole time. But I'm always intrigued by trying to manifest even these works now back into 3 dimensions. So now I'm even playing with 3D printing or creating a sculpture from this kind of data-driven like 2-dimensional works or digital works on screen. So yeah, so it's like almost like a cyclical process that I love to play with, and I think it's happened throughout my life. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you for listening.
Well, thank you, Rankin, for that very detailed presentation. Actually, I have a question for both of you and Wang Lin, because since both of you are very experienced in presenting your artworks or projects in a physical space, what do you think is the major difference in terms of artwork presentation in a physical space and in a digital or virtual space, such as the metaverse exhibition we work on for this the art festival this time? Like, do you have any comments?
I think one of the well, for me, one of the most exciting aspects of the metaverse or the virtual space is how things can be larger than life. So in a physical space, an installation or an artwork can sometimes be constrained by the space of the room, the size of the room, your, well, budget constraints. That's a practical reality. Could be constrained by the weight of the material, especially, for example, plexiglass that I was working with is extremely heavy the bigger it gets. But if I were to imagine or let the imagination run wild of creating something like that in a metaverse, I can go as large as I want. So I think for me, that is really one of the key beauties of excitement of the metaverse.
Well, like I explained, I I agree completely also with Wyn-Lyn in terms of like you can create something larger than life without the, I guess, the cost in some ways, but at the same time I'm trying to create like it's always very difficult to recreate the physical experience. So I think that's where also the unknown and the exploration of like coming out of the cave, not only because of COVID, but also this new kind of development that suddenly research things that were initially just published in papers or presented in conferences and journals are suddenly now manifesting themselves in real life, and people are trying to realize them in more ways. So I think it's pretty interesting to kind of play around with that idea, but the challenge is always trying to recreate that sense of wonder of someone, even though they're staring at a screen, they can be completely immersed in an experience. So to me, that's still very hard to come by in the digital space. Even though you can wear VR glasses, it's not completely real. And AR elements can only go so far in making things real unless you do spend so much time into like visual effects and stuff like that. But the sense of touch or the sense of smell is still very lost in the digital space. So it's a challenge to kind of replace that with something else and make create that experience with people again.
Yeah, it's good. I was going to ask if there's any productive, like external constraints working within the metaverse, because I can imagine, and throughout this experience, I know still, I mean, it's one of the reasons why we frame this exhibition space as a cave, because to us, it's like technology-wise, there is still a lot of primitive things going on, like there are a lot of limitations, right? But I'm going to save this question for you again later. And could we have Aleksandra to present next? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, so Christine will be my assistant now, showing slides. Okay, I got the subject about the future of digital art and generative media, and it's really a wide concept, and got me thinking about a few topics and a few definitions and stuff like that, because at the moment I'm actually at the classroom of doctoral studies in digital art, and I've been here first student, so I've been here for around 20 years. So I've been a student of this program, and I'm a professor here. And a lot of times students come and ask, but what is digital art and how do you define it? Because they need to fit in a definition. And whenever we come to those things, it's really something that I like to be really wide, like open, so you can fit a lot of stuff there. And there is this kind of definition that this is borrowed from Christine Paul. And actually, you can see digital art as art that uses digital technologies in some part of production, for example. But there is also this more specific where we use technology in a different way, and we amplify some characteristics of the medium or technology, and the things that I put emphasis on are interactivity and participatory features. And that's why everything else we continue to analyze about digital art goes with these two things rather well. So if Christine goes to the next slide, you will see that one of the topics also that pops up frequently is how we see interactivity in art. And because my field is interactive arts, and because I always use physical interactivity and stuff like that, when I was defending my doctoral thesis, one of my old professors was like, but isn't every art interactive? Actually, a book is interactive. You can decide where you want to start reading book. You can decide about a lot of things, how you read that, you touch it, you get even physical with every piece of art. You can touch painting, you can do a lot of things if they aren't secured in the museum and stuff like that. So Also, this topic emerged a few weeks ago. Digital artists are also sometimes overwhelmed by the implications of needing to put interactivity in their pieces, or they have some kind of negative feelings about this forced interactivity to the pieces. So if we see things really in a flexible way, then we can see that every piece can be interactive. So the future of digital art and interactive media is in a way present all the time around us. So everything we do can be digital art or is digital art in a way, and it is interactive. But also the participation part is really important, because you can have pieces that really depend on participation from the public. There are sometimes pieces that can't exist without participation, because they need some initial input to get started. And because Wang Lin was now talking about collecting data, collecting some kind of information to produce the piece. It can also be put in a way that we need to feed him with some kind of information to get this piece on a visual level, to see it in some way. So, Christine, next. Let me see what was the next thing. So, because we are talking about the interactivity, internet as a medium was a perfect platform for exploring this kind of interactivity, because whenever we want to see a piece online, we need to click and to go through it and to choose some things and make, for example, a non-linear narrative. So things evolve in this environment that wasn't at first made for that. Simply connecting internet, connecting computers in a network, making appropriate software applications for content to be explored on that network was purely in a different way, scientifically engaged. So because we as artists in some way adopted platform, medium, technology, we also try to develop it and to use that interactivity in different ways. And because we already mentioned the metaverse and some words that are popping up recently and go along with this kind of defining things, what was Web 1.0, Web 2, or Web 3. And I basically, with talking with a lot of other people, we knew what first Web 1 was, like putting some static content online and offering that to the public. Then this next step, and I remember when we started talking about Web 2, we were really hopeful or expecting something wonderful or something new, but actually it was ability for us to for us to curate the content online or to participate in a way. And basically it worked perfectly. And now the buzzword is Web3, and what we see Web3 will bring us. And two key aspects I think will be important. One is owning digital content, and the other one is decentralizing everything. So not there isn't one person or company or one entity owning stuff, but actually we are owning everything, or we can decide what we own, and that's some democratic way of connected with content online. And now Christina will help me with the next topic. Yes, so also one thing, actually yesterday was one of my friends was also posting this thing, because as I said, Web3 is like a popular term. Everyone is talking about that, and also NFT as recognized as something in connection with art, because we are still artists. We are using different mediums, and we are producing art pieces in a different categories, and categorizing art as NFT art is topic that should be discussed, because we can see NFT or blockchain as different stuff. And the last thing on this slide, like genre, medium, distribution channel, or certificate of authenticity, are stuff that can be seen as something connected to NFTs or connected to blockchain technology. And there is true in each of that. But if we focus on genre, this is the first thing that I put in front, because if we use the technology in a specific way with a critical reflection on technology, then we can call that blockchain art. But actually, we are still mostly using blockchain in as a new thing, exploring the medium, for example, but also not so dramatically using the possibilities of the medium. Basically, all of the things that I'm mentioning here are some topics for discussion, or topics that we can talk more, and also that I don't have any definitive opinions on those, because we are still observing how stuff are growing and how we will use it in the future. And in some way, we are at the beginning of using blockchain as a technology for art. But the thing that's most important that Wyn-Lyn and Wang Lin are using in their pieces are the topics or the themes. They aren't obsessed by the making just attractive images. They have a background and a story behind it and a topic they're interested in. And that's the thing that we should relate or focus on in the future, to analyze all the topics that are important and that we should explore more in connection with this blockchain technology. And basically, we can't distinguish all those mediums, media, basically in all of the art, whether it's digital or analog. There are a set of core issues and topics we're exploring, and that will be also the future of digital art and interactive media. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Aleksandra. I have a somewhat unrelated but very practical question, because you mentioned owning digital content. So I have a naive question. How do you protect the intellectual properties of digital art? Do you protect the code, or do you protect the images? Yeah, I'm just curious.
Yeah, it depends. It's also, I love when we focus on new stuff, new media, to connect with history. And I have one of my favorite colleagues, she's a media theorist. She always says, and what about cave paintings and stuff like that? And you can always make an analog to comparison with different media. So here, the problem with digital in your question is, because the copy of a digital image is one-to-one, it's always identical. But also the other part of your question is, what is in a, for example, if you are doing generative art or code software art or code-based art, then if is our piece code or the result of the code, or if we are making renders of a 3D model, is 3D model basis, I mean, something that has to be protected, or the final output as a render of that 3D model and how we protect it. So storing something on blockchain and in that way marking yourself as an author or owner of that, or the person that put it on a blockchain first in some way has a history and can provide that aspect of authenticity or ownership of some kind of product, or in this case piece of art. But I don't know, you can always use the traditional ways of copywriting, protecting stuff, and it's a difficult subject in different areas, so it gets amplified in this field of ours.
Another reason I'm asking, because we have actually the third top 3 artist, Shio from Korea, but she's not joining us today. She is busy, she cannot join us today. And I see on her Instagram, she's basically posting a new work on her IG every single day. I wonder how she does it. So yeah, that led me to thinking about, you know, the copyright and intellectual properties of digital artworks, things like that.
Yeah, but also some I don't know how to call it, not to measure in a pejorative way, but since a lot of us are doing programming, we come from a different background where sharing code is approached in a different way of sharing technology, of making, I don't know, paintings, sculpting, where artists sometimes keep a secret of their own way of making something. And in the coding world, we are more open to sharing code and showing this part of code as also accomplishment, not being the technique that produces something, but also something we want to show. And showing code that in that way allows others to learn from that. So being open source is some way educative and promotes advancement in the field. So it can be like this humane approach.
I think it could be like beneficial to all, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Aleksandra. Could we have Icki to present next? Then we go back to serial idiot. Thank you, Aleksandra. Thank you.
Such a fascinating discussion and presentation there, Aleksandra. So thank you for that. You could open up a whole can of worms with your question on IP, you know, with CCO and I have plenty to that I could contribute to that discussion, but that's not why I'm here. So as always, Icki is not prepared, surrounded in a forum by people that are far brighter, far more intelligent, far more interesting. So I'll try and keep it short. The proposition was to talk about the future of crypto art opportunities in the commercial world, and I wanted to do that very directly. And if anybody is interested in diving into some of the detail and getting more into the weeds, as they say, then I'd be happy to do that. But I think first of all, we have to make some definitions, and to Aleksandra's point, you know, ontology matters. You know, what is crypto art? So if we're going to talk about the future of crypto art, we have to understand what crypto art is, right? And that's important, and it's not the same thing to everybody, right? You would think it would be as easy to say any art purchasable by crypto, but that's not really fair, because anything could evolve to be that, right? Including masters' works of the past, and I still wouldn't define that as crypto art. So throughout history, artists have often gotten a rough deal, right? With corporations, middlemen profiting from work after they've received and spent the fees that they were kind of paid, right? Now many believe that the decentralized world of Web3, and specifically non-fungible tokens, offers an alternative, right? So by creating and releasing work metadata, visuals, whatever, linked to non-fungible tokens. You have the opportunity to take back control as creators, and where the work is used, and payment terms, and so on and so forth. And I talk about this because we have to understand this foundation before we talk about what the future could look like, right? Pre-crypto, everything is reliant on trust. Signing legal papers, chasing payments, often it's just impossible. And once you sell work, that's all you're ever going to get, right? So the immutable encrypted nature of the blockchain means it can be used to prove not only where the artwork comes from, right, but where it's been, who's owned it, its provenance, right? Is that a big deal? Well, I think that's where the magic lies, right? Because, this is useful because prestigious owners, galleries, collectors, celebrities can all have an impact on the valuation of that piece of digital art, right? Or something that has been digitized, right? And inspire a whole culture around it. So allowing digital artwork to have real monetary value through its association with a token creates a new class of asset in some respects, right? That might fit well with the lives of generations who live in the digital world, right? Just as much as they do in the physical world. And I can imagine over time, that's only going to increase. Diversity is really important. I mean, Aleksandra said, I was really interested with what Aleksandra said about this kind of expectation or need for interactivity or dynamic leveraging of this technology, and I think that's particularly interesting. But I think it's really about the choice and the diversity. That's the word of the defiant artist, culturally speaking, right? So where innovation resides, not in the expectancy of leveraging technology, right? The entire reductionist mentality could always be seen as an opinion of refinement, potentially, right, to some people. So what is the future of crypto art opportunities in the commercial world? Well, who knows, right? I certainly don't. There we go, end of presentation. So, it's such a loaded question, right? And you're going to get 1,000,001 views, and none of us can foresee the future. So all we can do is kind of is propose some kind of projection, right? Some estimation with give or take error term, right? And the way I think best to do that is to look in the past, right? I mean, art history is recursive, and the way everything operates is recursive in nature. So it makes sense. So I see the future of crypto art as two things, right? Part validation for digital mediums and artists, and part a breeding ground for innovation and change, right? So this is about, the validation comes really through the integrity, through provenance, right? It gives digital artists a mechanism to stand among peers. But wait, Icki, that makes no sense. Generative art has been operating since the 1950s. Provenance is fine. Galleries have it sorted. This is doing nothing relative for artists that are being represented by galleries that care to do it. Not everybody. It's unmanageable, you see, and that's the point. If an artist in 100 years or 50 years becomes relevant, historically significant, there is no record unless they were operating in the traditional domain. And we can take this conversation all sorts of directions. But if you consider the commercial world, or as I call it, the traditional domain of art, what are we really talking about here, guys? Right? Are we going to be honest? Right? Because if we're going to be honest, then we're talking about 95% of success being dictated by Hong Kong, London, New York, and a handful of galleries or museums, right? 10 MoMAs, Paces of this world, the Guggenheims, right? That's the so-called gatekeeping of the centralized domain, arguably, right? That's the mentality of the crypto assessment, right? The crypto art assessment. So this is very important, right? This is very important, right? It's I keep hearing digital renaissance. It's a great buzzword, digital renaissance. This is not a movement. This is not an art movement. You know, crypto art and its potential future is a complete shift in paradigm, right? And that's important. It's a paradigm shift, right? Within that, you have the opportunity for collectives and new movements and what have you. Generative art is really finding its ground now as a legitimized art movement. But you know, really what we're talking about is a paradigm shift and discovery, right? Suddenly these galleries in the traditional domains or critique, formal critique, academy or whatever, right? You know, they're not the only people, right, that can speak volumes, right, and dictate the valuation, right, of art, right, because it's huge. And with crypto native wallets creating their own vision for valuation of said art, you know, people's voices can carry from all over the world, not just in 3 or 4 locations across a handful of galleries and spaces. So the future of crypto art is opportunity, right? Who knows where that will go, but we're seeing traditionalists, you know, adopting. Pace Gallery signed a great agreement with the Art Blocks platform. MoMA has spoken about selling masterworks to invest in crypto art. The Royal House of Medici is operating in digital patronage, you know, and it goes on and on and on and on and on. So there is a lot of opportunity. So let's talk about very quickly valuation, right? And why I mentioned valuation and why it's so important. If you can, it doesn't matter what way you look at it, right? Everybody values assets and art in different ways, right? But there are a few things that everybody kind of agrees on, right, in the traditional domain. Authenticity, provenance, right? And then, you know, historic significance, debatable, arguable, and then data, right? Price data, primary sales, secondary sales, galleries, exhibits, auction houses, public spaces, etc., and so forth. All of which is being challenged in digital art because that valuation model is not applicable anymore, because 95% of the investment which dictates the current valuation model is crypto native, and they don't follow those same valuation models. So the future is very interesting. You know, do those worlds collide? Does the traditional domain decide to take on the same valuation model as the natives? Unlikely. You know, or do they find a kind of happy medium, right? So it goes back to this overarching theme of, you know, diversity, opportunity, and really a paradigm shift, right? You know, in the way that we see art. Of course, NFTs are greater than art, and art is a wonderful use case for NFTs. But really, you know, there's a lot of room for growth here. You know, contracts are great and provenance is great, but you know, there's no loan provenance. You know, there's no separation of ownership and location yet, right? And you know, questions around administration, right? Conservatorship. You know, there's a lot of work to be done here in this space, but I think the future is bright. And if you were asking me whether I bet on one of one art today, as they call it in the cryptoverse, right? They call it one of one art, traditional art versus the collectibles market, which is more of like a collectible Pokemon cards, that kind of thing, right? Which is a different asset, if you like. Am I betting on it today? The answer is no. I'm not betting on it today, but I'm betting on it in the future. And that's because I can't see currently a better estimation based on the recursive nature of art history, right? And the way it has evolved. Technology does this. It did it with Impressionists, with paint, right? It's done it all the way through. And the real catalyst is when that technology meets the paradigm shift, right? When portrait became abstract, right? And so what we have is the perfect recipe. We have the technology, we have the potential for new movements and isms, which are inspiring. We have connectedness through current technology, right? And then we have, you know, innovation. So for me, it's kind of a no-brainer. I think it's fair to make that assessment. I don't really have much more to add than that, I suppose, but I'm always open to questions and discussion. We could go into these things very deeply, and I dare tread those footsteps because you'll never get me to stop talking. Okay.
Well, thank you, Icki. I do have a question. I mean, the economics aside, like to an artist, like what does really the emergence of the crypto art bring to like the creative process, like in terms of creative innovation? Yeah.
Well, it's limitless. You know, it truly is limitless, right? You can't separate these things, unfortunately, right? You can't separate the commercial element because that influences focus and eyes and attention. It's an internal unspoken marketer, right? And you can't ignore that because the louder the voices, the more engaged people become. And the more engaged people become, the more they can see unique opportunity. You have traditional artists digitizing their work, you have digital photography, right? You have people learning about different mediums and AI and GAN and technology, which is I mean, look at our example today. We have a traditional painter, sculptress, suddenly embracing AI, looking at GAN, now looking at her creative process changing altogether and exploring the idea of using AI and physical and AI and physical and having this infinite kind of, you know, that's beautiful to me. That wouldn't happen. That wouldn't happen, right? It's about awareness. It's about getting out of our boxes. Look, it was the defiant artist that painted the Berlin Wall and brought eyes and attention to the cultural impact. That is its utility. That is art's utility. It's not just the aesthetic, and the same rules apply, right? As far as I'm concerned, right? You can't just look at it as in isolation, right? It's a multivariate analysis, you know, in my opinion. in my wacky opinion, and you know, I'm wrong every day. I change my mind one day to the next. But
no, I see your point. Jake has a question.
Okay, I guess my question is like for Icki and Aleksandra. So like wonderful presentations. I think one thing is that beyond running a creative tech studio, I am also a new media artist that dived into NFTs. So I released like a NFT collectible of sort of like plants that grow every single day, because like I wanted to question what NFTs can be, how we can push the medium of smart contracts. I think the sort of like question I want to push to you guys is, I get labeled a lot as an NFT artist, but the idea is that like you don't call yourself like a canvas artist, right? Like if you paint. So it's really interesting how like there's no such thing as NFT art in my eyes. And this is actually one of the first few instances I've heard of crypto art. So like if I sold my art in Singapore dollars, am I a Singapore dollar artist? You know, so I think that's a very interesting way of like seeing it from my point of view. Like, I wonder what's your perspective on like on this like idea of crypto art or NFT art?
Yeah, I'll say it very quickly, and then Aleksandra can educate us all properly. This is always going to be the case, right? And I just think, look, you are what you are. You are what you label yourself as, right? If you wake up tomorrow and you call yourself a creative, an artist, a crypto artist, an NFT artist, all, you know, you are what you are. You know, respectfully, stuff what anyone else thinks, right? But it is important to consider the real meaning behind some of this, because to some people, they call themselves crypto artists as a point of making the distinction between centralized and decentralized values, right? They're embracing the idea of decentralization. They're saying, I don't want to be part of your meta. I want to be part of this new meta. I don't care for traditional values. And so I will call myself a crypto artist. But that is a handful of people that have that mentality. And like I said, these definitions are not clear, right? And so there will always be ambiguity. But I would just say, you know, enjoy it, enjoy the moment, don't care about the small things, and focus on what's important, right? I was labeled a a crypto NFT artist when I exhibited alongside Andy Warhol, to my horror, at the Calgary Contemporary, right? You know, and I'm sitting there thinking, what a wonderful moment for me. 20 years have led to this. It's a really nice moment. You know, it's like that first exhibit, you know, that it's like a PR happy moment. And they call me a crypto NFT artist, which I felt was really devaluing all of the last 20 years and what I've done, right? But you know, in hindsight and given a bit of time and you know, to think about it, I realized that there was no offense intended in that. You know, they're trying to elevate the idea and to bring eyes and attention, and we need that for adoption if we want that beautiful outcome of diversity.
Oh, I completely agree with Icki. So also, I'm not happy with this title, and it's always clear for me in which medium I'm working, and I'm focusing on that, and I don't identify with that title. So whenever there is a possibility, I will explain what I'm doing, what's my medium, what's my practice, and this is just different kinds of platforms for distribution, for commercial aspects and stuff, but you can compare them to virtual galleries, where you own the content, where there isn't much influence on curating your own stuff, so there's much more freedom, so you can see it in that way also.
Great, so the judges, they both agree on this.
Yeah, so I will have to leave. So my students are coming. It was a pleasure being with you this morning, and I hope we'll see each other again soon.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
So last but not least, we have Jade from Serial Co for the presentation. Thank you.
Cool. Okay. Yes. I guess I will introduce ourselves a bit before we begin. We don't have much philosophical things. I thought it would be really interesting if we focus slightly more on like how we created the metaverse and some like behind the scenes pictures. So it's going to be a quick one. Okay, so yeah, we're Serial Co, short for serial communication. Serial communication is the protocol that computers talk to each other. It's sort of like this pun that we always like to say for our company, because we believe that we're so intertwined with technology, but yet most people don't really understand the concept behind technology. So I guess like our job is trying to find a way that we can connect science, art, technology, engineering, and mesh all this together and then like effectively communicate that out. So these are some of the works that we have done. We have dived into AR, VR, XR. We have also done NFTs. Now we're doing blockchain R&D and as well as our metaverse, and that's why I guess we're here. So we have produced a few metaverses for a few clients before, and this is our second art exhibition that we've done. This time we've done it on Spatial. Spatial is a great platform because it's browser-based, that's for one. It means that we sort of like create this accessibility for everybody. Maybe I'll go through that later. I'll go through some of the work in progress that we have done to get to this point. I think Hilda was showing how the space was like. This is like sort of like all the sort of like concepts and blueprints of how we try to design the space out. I'm really trying to bring up the concept of what Plato's cave is, trying to make it circular, trying to give it depth as well, trying to give it height. At the end of the day, we thought user journey was also an important decision to how people traverse this metaverse, and we understand that most people who are going into the metaverse will be doing it for the first time. So as a result, we opted for like a more like slightly safer approach where we sort of move from somewhere within the cave to somewhere outside of that cave. And there's also a lot of like testing that was involved, trying to get like the perfect material and whatnot. The background that you see was rendered on Unreal Engine before we brought it over. So we can't possibly fly like a 360 camera up into space, so into the sky. So we did it on Unreal Engine instead. Built the cave. We basically mishmashed a bunch of rocks that we found online, and also crafted some rocks that that were quite necessary for the architecture out through sculpting with ZBrush. We tried to retopologize all these rocks so that they will be more optimized for the spatial metaverse, such that most phones, even older phones, can also access this space. So this was just like some of our older work in progress shots that we sent over to Hilda and Iven and Shane to check out. So one of the toughest challenges was actually building the fire. So there is no fire particle system, or rather there's no light and particle system within Spatial. Wang Lin is laughing because when he came over to our studio to test out some things, he saw us struggling with fire. So we tried like multiple different methods to get fire to work. Eventually we settled on trying to use a mesh, then really studying how fast fire flickers, and then emulating that within the space. So I guess we are the first people to ever bring fire into Spatial properly, because we have been in the space for a while and we haven't seen anybody executing fire as well as us. So we then released our secret onto the Discord chat on Spatial, so that we sort of like open source this information. So now people know how to create fire within this space. So we're the first one to do fire on Spatial. So yes, I think lastly, just to like sort of round things off, if you haven't been into the space, please feel free to grab the link from Shun or Christine to enter our metaverse. It's a really nice space. But beyond that, I guess we are just gonna like quickly run through what sort of like the factors of this emergence of a online art space or virtual art space can bring. So the next slide would be that firstly, I think one key point is we are bringing accessibility to a lot of people like very quickly, and basically the whole idea of decentralizing a physical space such that it's no longer geographically locked. So now you don't need to go to the Instinc physical space. You can visit the Instinc virtual gallery instead. And in that way, we suddenly have access to, instead of 5 billion people in Singapore, we have access to billions and trillions of people all around the world who have internet connections that can now jump into the metaverse. So the art has suddenly become now has eyeballs from all over the world. I guess it's also a matter of progress, moving the art, how art can be seen, how art can be represented, and how art can be I guess represented within a space, and then innovative in the sense that now people are now forced to push technology forward. Right now we only can put 50 people within Spatial. Fortnite can do 100 people. Eventually, metaverses will be able to hold millions of people in one instance of a server. That is what like keeps me up at night sometimes, knowing that like technology has not caught up to what we want it to be. So we are actually still really at the forefront, and everything is still like sort of like this wild west when it comes to a metaverse. The closest any metaverse has come to this is Other Side, run by the Board 8 Yacht Club's Yuga Labs department, where they just ran a beta test instance of like 4,000 people in one instance at one time, and nobody was lagging, and it was browser based as well. So I think we're not too far from the future as of yet. But I guess lastly and second lastly, it's like experience is a whole new different way of experiencing art, and lastly, giving back agency to the people. So now you don't have to have like a physical space to create and to showcase art. Now artists can create their own exhibition, their own metaverse to showcase their works in the way that they want it to be shown. So I thought that was really important as well. Okay, I believe that's the end of our slides. You can catch us more at our social medias, serial.sg, and also at serialco_ on Instagram and Twitter. Yes. Okay, that's it. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you, Jake. First of all, I have to apologize. We didn't know it was so difficult to make the fire.
It's like the most important part of Plato's Cave.
Yeah, but yeah, it turns out really cool. So yeah. Yeah. I think I have one question that it's for you and also Wang Lin and Wang Lin. Like we know there is still a lot of constraints, like technology-wise within the metaverse, but do you find that any productive constraints? Because usually the artists become more creative working with limits and limitations, right? So from this experience working with this spatial platform on this metaverse, how does this kind of constraints, technological constraints, bring out the creativity within you? Right? So I think this question is open for all three of you, yeah, because you have first-hand experience working within the metaverse.
Oh, Wang Lin, do you want to go? Because you had so many chains.
Yeah, so it's pretty interesting because my works, I guess it's also because it was a lot of like bare coding, so it appeared very pixelated, and we had like huge compression issues with playing with the environment. So it was also like the kind of the artistic integrity, back to the very traditional like question of like how much are you willing to give up or sacrifice to when you are creating like the digital piece as opposed to what you intended it to be, whether physical or digital. So I think it was also a new step because I used to do in engineering there's a 3D modeling, and then in animation and digital media VFX there's also 3D modeling, but it's two totally different ways of seeing it. One seems more like a estimation or trying to make things look real. The other one is actually it has to comply with physical, like with physics. So also moving from that very practical mindset to something that's more adventurous, more abstract was I think trying to get out of the mindset. So in that sense, I already had that kind of mental constraint, but also then you impose like spatial constraint. So how to realize it, make it work well within the space. And honestly speaking, I say I'm very thankful because it was a digital space and not just a digital gallery, everything's on flat walls. But at the same time, I love commenting in opposition, like to those who might be familiar with, the game RuneScape. It's almost like that to me because I saw RuneScape, especially when it was like early on in the old versions where everything just is somewhat low resolution. So it reminded me of that, but it's interesting. It was interesting to me to kind of almost participate and create in that kind of environment and that space. Yeah.
I think also I'm interested because I personally I have not had a chance to visit Singapore this time. So because you guys also did the spectacular artwork on this large outdoor screen at the 10 Square, right, in Singapore. I'm interested in learning a little bit more about your collaboration with like the technical team, but with the 10 Square team, but also like with Serial. Like what is your experience working as an artist with designer? I think this kind of collaboration is very interesting. So I mean, this is also for Wang Lin and Wyn-Lyn as well, and also for Jade.
I think in terms of collaboration with Serial, it was really interesting to see how, I mean, for me, the idea of non-white walls in a exhibition space was really cool. So this very organic feel and the choice of materials that they had in the cave as well, I think worked very well with what I was also trying to present with my works, this elemental organic feel to a digital work. So I think for me it was a good collaboration in the sense of how they could understand the idea of integrating something very tactile or the sense of material, even though we can't touch and actually feel with our hands in the metaverse, but I think they actually did bring across that sense of the elemental very well.
Yeah, I think for our team, because it wasn't just me working on it, at least four people from my team were working on it at one time. It was really interesting because like some of the people working in my team are fans of Wyn-Lyn. So like they were like obviously like really excited of like seeing how to present the work and whatnot. And I think some of with Wang King coming down and when Ho came down, it was really like interesting to see like how there was this like intersection of sorts of how like it's not just about the technology but also about like the people behind it, like the people behind like the art and how there was this collaboration. So there was a lot of like intermingling, trying to figure things out together and whatnot. On the technical end, there's also like this idea that I guess like for all of us, we had to work with limitations of trying to like make sure that every single most phones and most computers were able to take things, so we had to like downsize things. We had to make sure limitations were met, and I guess like that's how like we can play with creativity that way. So I think like everybody was very accommodating to that as well. So we were able to get the most out of like whatever we were working with. Yeah.
Thank you, Jake.
So Jake, a question for you actually. So would you foresee for spatial platform or the metaverse platform, the technology will change a lot, in the near future? Because now I see that there are artists, they would have their own preferable say quality and format, and then sometimes the metaverse platform might not necessarily accommodate. But do you see or see a trend of it, or the technology will improve drastically in the near future?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think like Icki, as Icki has said, money is important, and now I think many people are looking at creating these like platforms or metaverses. I think a lot of people are trying to create like platforms for NFTs, but and people are going to realize, oh, that's a very saturated market. So that whoever is like building metaverses now, they will know that this is like probably like the way that they are going to like set themselves apart, because you can have multiple metaverses, and as long as they use like a API or whatever library that has become the standard, they could integrate their metaverse with some other metaverse. So I do see like slowly but surely more and more metaverses popping up with newer and better capabilities, and eventually when the conglomerate of tech giants from Silicon Valley decide like, okay, this is how we're going to run metaverses, and then when everybody just like listens to them, and then we're going to have like this boom and big insurgence of like metaverses throughout. And then and I guess that's when like you will then realize like, okay, this is like the de facto metaverse for like art projects and whatnot. And I think we haven't reached that yet. I think like even for Spatial or VR chat or any other metaverse that exists out there, there is no de facto metaverse out there. So hopefully when one comes out with their perfect marketing and branding plan, with beautifully executed like technical limited execution, so like you don't have limitations, you can bring any format you want. I think that's when like that's what the real future of what metaverses are. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Hilda, for the question. Does anyone else have questions? Because I think Jake is I didn't miss anyone. So,
I have no more questions.
Okay, sure.
But only
Please.
I have no more questions, but I only want to apologize that I must go now. I'm getting increasingly distracted as as other responsibilities
no problem.
Are simmering. But I really thank everybody for your time. Congratulations to the fabulous artists. Very interesting listening to everybody and learning from you all and the experience. And thank you for trusting me to be part of this process. It was a wonderful experience. I'll be happy to do it again in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Icki. So do we have more questions for like I think for Jake and for the artists, the two artists.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the participants are allowed to ask questions. Are we allowed?
Yeah, sure. Please,
Right.
please.
Yeah, thank you so much, Instinc, for this panel, and to Wyn-Lyn. Regarding the use of guns, yeah, you mentioned that the first sets of art that you generate you didn't like, but if you think back, the training data set that you use, right, is your own work. So what was your process and learning, and how you change the way that you see yourself, you know, because basically this gun is yourself, right? So how you tweak your training data to actually use the data that you most like, or you find something interesting. For example, you just use art that you paint at this time of your life, or thinking these kind of thoughts. So maybe you can like elaborate on that portion, like how you reflect yourself on the model that you train, and like if this change the way you see your own work, right? Because sometimes you like you see your work with one perspective, but then the gun maybe show you, oh, actually my work looks like this, right? So yeah, maybe you can elaborate on that. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. So I'm actually training on paintings that I've made over the last decade. So it is quite a large body of work from my physical paintings. So I think also when I talk about curating the kind of images, it also could mean maybe looking at certain aspects or periods of my painting career that has evolved over the 10 years. So right now, for me, I'm very interested in negative space. So when I was generating the images and the videos, I was interested in capturing that sense of negative space and I guess weightlessness in my digital videos, in my digital work. So when I felt those that were not as successful, perhaps those were the ones that felt too filled up, felt too heavy, which led me to tweak my data set to include more negative compositions in the images, so that I could actually have an output of maybe a lighter feel to the generated videos. So for me, that's the current, I guess, aesthetics or emotive aspect of the digital work that I'm trying to aim for. But who knows, as I create more physical paintings, because of course I'm still going to make physical paintings because that is also part of my practice. So while I'm exploring the digital aspect, I'm not completely eradicating my physical practice. I'm still going to do both in tandem. So I think it's interesting to see how, as I create more physical paintings in the future, as I feed those new images back to the gun training, I might discover maybe even new aesthetics or aesthetic styles that I might veer towards down the road. I'm not sure if that might have answered the question.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Thank you for this answer. Do we have more questions? Okay, if not, if Shinu has anything to say, or Christine?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think maybe this is kind of the end of our panel discussion. So thank you so much, Ivan and Hilda from MUSTHAVEKEYS. Thank you so much, Jake from Zero. Thank you, artists and everyone who's listening. So I think it's a beautiful closure to our Instinc the Art Festival. And it's so touching to hear all the contributions and the sharing. So I hope that you guys will, really get benefited from this panel discussion. I mean, it was really inspiring for me as well. So yeah, have a good evening. TGIF.
Is it a protocol to, I mean, is it a common practice to take a group photo on Zoom?
Tomorrow.
I don't know.
Do a group photo.
Yes, I was going to.
Okay, great.
Comfortable to do a group photo really quickly to just commemorate So grab your cameras and
Yeah,
everything.
maybe Christine, do you want to do a screenshot?
Yes, I'll be doing a screenshot. Okay, so whoever that's got your cameras off, if you could, you can go ahead and turn it on and just say cheese. We'd love to have you in the shot. So, okay, no worries, Yuri. I mean, your profile picture is really nice too, Yuri. Looks like you're checking the time all the time, so that's great. Hello, hi. Okay, so I'm gonna do a very quick screenshot. Hello. Thank you so much for tuning in, especially if you're outside. Stay safe, everyone. Stay safe. Okay, so on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Great. All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us on this. Okay, yep. As Shion mentioned, this is a really great closure. So wishing everyone a great day ahead. If you're in Singapore, stay safe from the rain. If not, looking forward to see everyone once more. And if you've yet to check out the metaverse, the link is in the chat. Otherwise, please check out our social medias for more information. Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Bye bye, everyone.